Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Jonathan. Thank you all for being here. Especially like to thank Vasuki and Mehmet for their support throughout the fellowship, as well as everyone here at Gallatin. I'd also like to thank Nasser Abdurrahmeh, who was my independent study advisor, as well as Nadim and everyone at Al-Shabaka for hosting me during the course of my internship. So this summer, I worked as an editorial intern with Al-Shabaka, the Palestinian Policy Network. Al-Shabaka is an online Palestinian think tank that aims to educate and foster public debate on Palestinian human rights and self-determination, and they do so through written policy briefs, monthly webinars, as well as a podcast. Led by a small core team, Al-Shabaka relies on a network of over 200 members across the globe, including activists, academics, journalists, human rights advocates, and others, to provide their expertise. And in this way, Al-Shabaka plays a key role in amplifying Palestinian voices that have long been left out of mainstream Western media and policy circles. And I'd especially encourage everyone to follow Al-Shabaka's members on Twitter and other social media, really for the best on-the-ground coverage and analysis of events in Palestine. And I think that's especially important now as the West Bank in particular witnesses some of the worst Israeli settler violence and the largest state-led crackdown on Palestinian resistance in nearly a decade. So working with Al-Shabaka's managing editor, Nadim Bawalsa, I edited policy briefs at all stages of the peer review process. I drafted executive summaries and email announcements, and even had the chance to write a few op-eds. And since Al-Shabaka, I should note, is an online think tank, and their smallest team is scattered across Palestine, Jordan, Egypt, Spain, and here in the US, I stayed here in New York for the duration of the internship. So I'll talk a bit more now about the scope of Al-Shabaka's work, and I'm just going to focus here on the projects that I was involved with during my internship. I think this will provide a good sense of the organization's broader mission. So first and foremost, Al-Shabaka members highlight and analyze ongoing human rights abuses within Palestine. One policy brief I edited discussed the practice of administrative detention. So this is, at any given time, Israel detains hundreds of Palestinians without charge or trial, claiming that they pose a security threat, but without providing any public evidence. A second brief that I worked on examined forcible displacement of Palestinian Bedouin communities in the E1 corridor, which is an area east of Jerusalem that Israel is planning to annex. And the brief argued that humanitarian aid, and this is something that resonated with me from our spring seminar, that humanitarian aid that the EU, US, and other donor states provide to Palestinians in E1 has only fueled a vicious cycle of aid dependency. One of my final projects during the internship was to create a roundup of articles on the topic of Palestinian digital rights and how these rights are routinely violated. This spans from censorship of Palestinian social media content by such actors as Facebook, criminalization of online pro-Palestine activism, and as well as the expansion of Israeli surveillance technology, not only in the West Bank and Gaza, but increasingly around the globe. Al-Shabaka's focus is not geographically limited to Palestine, but also considers how Palestinian rights can be championed abroad. So for example, one of Al-Shabaka's analysts wrote a policy brief this summer about a new wave of legislation in the UK that targets social justice organizing, with particularly worrying implications for Palestinian solidarity activism. And to plug a bit of my own writing, I was lucky to have the Al-Shabaka team help me place an op-ed this summer on the topic of the Israel Premier Tech Professional Cycling Team and its role in advancing Israeli soft power objectives in the sporting world. The internship also helped to expand my conception of what policy and human rights work can actually entail. So we might assume that the broad goals of a policy organization are obvious, to influence government policy in order to enact social change. But just as important, especially in the Palestinian context, is to shape public discourse and shift the narrative on what is all too often termed the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This means, as my colleague argued during the Israeli assault on Gaza in August, pointing out the double standards in media coverage, where Ukrainian resistance, for example, against Russian occupation and military aggression is widely praised, while Palestinian resistance is condemned and delegitimized as terrorism. And I'd just like to close by talking about how Al-Shabaka helped me see also how policy work can be radically imaginative, not merely reacting to and analyzing events, but also envisioning alternative political futures. In other words, it is to take a step back and ask, what would it actually look like to dismantle Israeli apartheid and secure Palestinian rights? Might it mean, as Al-Shabaka member Leila Farsakh argues, abandoning the two-state framework altogether and working towards the idea of a civic, democratic state of equal citizens in all of historic Palestine? And how can this transformation build upon the ongoing efforts by Palestinians themselves to imagine their own collective liberation? So I'll stop there. Thank you.